Today on Ham Radio Q&A, I open the mailbag and answer your questions, so please keep watching for more. Hi, I'm Michael, KB9VBR, your host for Ham Radio Q&A. I'm on a mission to inspire and educate the amateur radio community, so if this is your first time watching, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Well, October was crazy. The month started out with QRZ.com reporting that I was dead. Then I had a busy month of amateur radio-related activities, including helping out with the local club, relocate some repeater equipment, going to the Wisconsin State APRS Races Conference, and spending this last weekend activating a pair of Parks on the Air entities. The POTA activation was probably the most fun I had in a long time, so if you haven't seen that video, I recommend you check it out. But speaking of Parks on the Air, Alan asks, for someone not familiar with this, what is a Parks on the Air activation? Do you register your contacts in some database? Well, Parks on the Air is a program where amateur radio operators work portable in national or state parks and forests. Activators and park hunters can receive points and awards for their participation. Plus, it's a lot of fun. Activators, they're the ones that upload the logs to the Parks on the Air database, and then the hunters, the ones checking out, finding the parks, you don't really have to upload your log to get the credits. It's the activator's job to provide the credits for you. But more details on this program can be found on the Parks on the Air website at www.parksontheair.com. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I attended the Wisconsin APRS Races Conference, and while I was there, I recorded a couple of the breakout sessions on digital communications. The video I posted on how to get on digital voice modes using hotspots generated this statement by Rod. An internet via amateur radio when disaster strikes? Just wow. Well, comments like this always make me wonder why a particular mode should be dismissed because its utility in an emergency communication setting, may be low. Well, just because digital modes can be tied to the internet does not make them useless in a disaster. I also wonder why many people make the assumption that during a disaster, we will be without the internet. Now, granted, the internet may be compromised in the affected areas, but outside of that, IP-enabled communications would be an excellent resource for passing traffic for the affected area. Plus, technologies like Mesh and Araden, which use IP technology and ham radio know-how, can create a backbone that would allow digital internet connections into a disaster zone so that our DMR, D-Star, and Fusion radios would still continue to function. But moving on, Joe's demonstration on low-pass filters generated a question from Mike. He says, good info from Joe. Would love to see more from him. Is a low-pass filter the same as a bandpass filter that DX Engineering sells? Well, a bandpass filter is slightly different than a low-pass filter. Low-pass filters either pass or attenuate a broad range of frequencies. For example, a low-pass filter will attenuate frequencies above 30 MHz and pass frequencies below 30 MHz. A bandpass filter will pass a narrow range of frequencies and attenuate all others. A couple of examples would be a filter that passes only frequencies, say in the 20-meter band, or a certain 2-meter frequency. And I'll elaborate on that. Common applications for bandpass filters are situations where you're running transmitters on multiple bands and you don't want them to interfere, like at a repeater site. The bandpass may be set to allow the repeater frequency to pass through, reducing interference from nearby transmitters. Another use would be if you're running a station on, say, 20 meters, and another person is simultaneously very close by running another station on 40 meters. This is a common occurrence on special events stations or maybe during field day. Individual stations on individual bands can have bandpass filters for those bands so that they allow their own frequencies to pass through and attenuate all others, eliminating or greatly reducing interference on the receive of their station. I've done a few different videos on APRS that feature the Yaesu FTM400 transceiver. Daz asks, would like to know what all the different APRS beeps and tones mean. I often hear 3 descending beeps after a beacon, but I have no idea what that means. Well, the Yaesu FTM400 is quite a musical radio when you have all those beeps and boops turned on. I almost forgot about this feature as I turned the beeps off as they were becoming quite distracting while I was driving. But if you're wondering what they all mean, head on over to Yaesu's APRS manual for the FTM400, and on page 95 there is a list with all of the beeps and their corresponding notes on a musical scale. A link to download this manual will be found in the video description below. Finally, let's talk a little bit about my video about getting started as a net control operator. I received so many great tips from other net control stations that I want to pass them along to you. Thank you to everyone that shared their experience and favorite hacks to make their net control experience better. First, Robert recommends, I like to use full over-the-ear headsets with a boom mic. It helps a lot. Headsets are great in noisy environments, and they keep your focus on the messages over the radio. A boom mic is better as it keeps your hands free to take notes or to enter information into a computer. And Mark says, all of the local nets I hear and participate in require operators to check in by providing your call sign slowly and phonetically, followed by your name and location. This eliminates the need for looking anyone up on a directory based on their call sign only, and it gets and getting it phonetically helps ensure it's copied correctly. As I always say, as a net control, you are in charge, and if you have trouble copying call signs or conditions are such that call signs can be difficult to discern, by all means, slow things down by asking for phonetics and slower enunciation. A very regular commenter and viewer of our videos, One Finger, mentions a common issue that are heard on nets, the double transmission. And he says, one of the nets that we have here in PA does a thing that I say is very useful. The net controller always says for everyone logging in to first say, this is, and then unkey for a second or two, then come back with their call sign, first name and location. This does 2 things for the net control. It prevents doubling or double stations doubling together, and it gives the control station more time to write down the call sign and other things. That's a great habit to get into. I don't know how many times I've heard other stations not do the pause while checking in, and then they manage to walk over or be walked on by other stations that are on net. Jim has a lot of great tips to remember when you're on net control or participating in a net. If the purpose of checking into nets or running a net as a net control operator is to prepare for handling emergency or disaster traffic in behalf of the Red Cross or other NGO or non-governmental organization, hospitals or government agency, it is a really good practice to first, number 1, avoid Q and other codes, full stop, don't do that. Number 2, speak slowly and clearly. It avoids repeats. Number 3, use ITU phonetics for any and all words that might be misunderstood, especially if you don't know how a word might be pronounced, regardless of how good or noise-free the signal is. Number 4, use as few words as possible. More words equal more clutter. Practice for public service, for bike or running events or other type activities. Few words equals less time on the air in case another station needs to break in with priority or emergency traffic. Monitor fire services, for a good tip or clues about that. And then number 5, take charge of the net. Giving examples of good technique when you key down. Advise other stations to be brief and avoid codes. Q codes might be cute and hammy, but they obfuscate meaning to those unclear with them, especially those of a served agency listening over your shoulder. And these are all very good points, especially if you're on an emergency service or WeatherNet or things like that. Weekly swap or fun nets, they tend to be a little bit more loose in their operation. But when I operate emergency communications net, whether as a drill or a real live thing, I ratchet up the structure and keep things moving in a quick and organized fashion. And I do that by eliminating clutter, being brief as possible, and staying away from jargon or unfamiliar terms. Moving on, Vern says, thank you. Tried my hand at a net control several times this summer. Received great advice from some Elmers in the local club. One thing I also did was to be an alternate net control station. I spent time just writing call signs and names like he indicated. That's great information. A couple commenters also suggested, starting out as an alternate net control station. This gives you great training as you're working alongside the net control operator to copy the check-ins and the traffic. Being the alternate will give you the feeling and experience of running the net without the fear of messing up. And speaking of traffic, Alan asks, what does no traffic mean or with traffic? In net parlance, to say you have traffic means you have a message for the net. Hams tend to be very peculiar in their terminology, so when you have a message for the net, we say traffic instead of the word message. This traffic or message can be as simple as an announcement or as formalized and as structured as something like an NTS radiogram. A common style of net found on the HF bands are traffic nets, where stations are passing highly regimented messages. These messages can move locally, regionally, and nationwide via the national traffic system. Back in the day when long-distance telephone calls were quite expensive and telegrams were a method of communication, it was quite common to send and receive these type of messages over the radio waves. Nowadays, the system runs mostly as an adjunct to the emergency communications network. Operators pass these messages mostly to maintain the network and to keep up their training for an emergency scenario that may require them. I'm really only scratching the surface of the national traffic system, and I'll devote an entire video on it in the future. But really, it's a vital part of the amateur radio service's overall emergency communication capability. Well, that's it for this month's questions. Cooler weather is settling in, so I'm moving a lot of my operations back indoors. But I've got a couple product review videos planned for this coming month, and if the weather's nice, I may still do something outdoors. Joe and I do have something up our sleeves, and we want to be able to accomplish it yet before it snows too hard. And of course, if there's a topic that you want to see, leave me a comment below and I'll add it to the list. Well, that's it for this month's questions. Please keep them coming. You can always leave them as a comment below, and I'll filter through them and answer them, respond to them, and we'll keep that conversation going. For more articles and information, you can check out my blog at www.jpol-antenna.com. Your support of this channel drives the production of future videos, so if you enjoy what you're seeing here, you can always give me that big thumbs up. And if you watch this long, you better hit that subscribe button. So then you hit it, pressing subscribe and the bell notification will inform you when future videos are released. Well, that's it for this time. I'm Michael, KB9VBR. Have a great day, and 73.